They say the worst kind of silence is the kind that follows a gunshot. The kind that tells you danger isn't over, it's thinking. And on the night my boy and I followed a trail of boot prints into the cottonwoods, I learned that sometimes the quiet is a trap with teeth. So before we step into that dark with us, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and if this story finds your chest the way it found mine. Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss what happens when two stubborn hearts refuse to leave a living thing behind. I promise you this isn't a tale about glory. It's about the kind of mercy that hurts. We'd been fixing fence at the north line when we heard the shot roll off the mesa like a slammed door. Coyotes scattered, birds blew out of the cottonwoods in one ragged breath, and my son, Evan, 12 and spring tall, looked at me with that unasked question boys use when they want to be brave and need permission. "It's early for hunters," he said, which was a polite way of saying nobody we know would be shooting this close to the creek after dusk. It had been a mean summer. Dry wind, brittle grass, a set of two-bit poachers out, working the county out of deer and anything else they could sell to a man who liked to brag. And the prints that cut across our back pasture like two bad signatures told me the shot didn't belong to supper or sport. We saddled in the fading wedge of daylight, the world turning the color of a bruise, and took the creek trail down into the trees, where the air smelled like damp cottonwood bark and the kind of trouble that pretends to be a breeze. Evan rode ahead a horse length like I taught him, not because he didn't need me, but because I needed him to know I believed he could. At the bend where the creek narrows to a sound that makes men honest, we found the first sign, fresh scuff in the silt, a cigarette crushed like a careless thought, and a loop of chain half buried at the bank, the kind used by people who solve problems with locks. I didn't say what I felt, which was a clench in my throat old enough to have its own name. Just clicked my tongue and eased my mare into the water, letting her pick her feet among the slick stones while Evan's gelding shadowed us like a good idea. On the far side, in a clearing the size of a church, we met the reason the shot had gone quiet. A horse stood chained to a deadfall with half a logging chain, wrapped twice around his chest and once around his neck. The kind of knot that doesn't plan to let go. He was a big one, coal black under dust, ribs showing, hip bones too sharp, a white snip on his nose that might have been pretty before the rope burns and the raw places where somebody's bad day had turned into his prison. Blood darkened the fetlock of his near hind, and a fresh groove across his shoulder oozed where a bullet had kissed and not committed. He threw his head when he saw us, eyes blown wide, then froze when Evan spoke, soft and low, saying, "Easy, buddy," the way he talks to skittish calves and napping dogs and anything else that doesn't owe him trust. The chain cut into bark and skin both, and the padlock winked in the last of the light like an insult. Oh, tack, no brand I recognized in the dirt and hair. Just that chain and the truth of it. Someone had staked a claim to a living thing and walked away to figure profit while the night did their work for them. We dismounted slow, hands high, shoulders sloped in the body language that tells herd animals you aren't there to cash a debt. "Don't get close to the business end," I told Evan, and he answered by moving where I would have moved, looping wide, talking, finding the breaths between the horse's flinches. Up close, the truth got worse. The bullet groove wasn't clean. The flesh puckered like a bad decision, and where the chain cinched near the chest, the skin wept an angry red that smelled of heat and iron. "They shot him to keep him from running," Evan said, not a question. "Or to mark him as theirs," I said, and felt the old anger that never got tired rise like a tide. The padlock was thick and mean, a brand new bully on an old chain. I carry a bolt cutter behind the cantle because ranch life rewards pessimists. I handed it to my son and took the halter rope out of my saddlebag, fingers working while memory scrolled the faces of men I'd seen use chains where hands should have. "We'll do the chest wrap first," I said. "When it loosens, he's going to think about exploding. If he does, you move out and give him room to be a mistake. If he doesn't, you tell him what a good boy is and you mean it." He nodded, jaw firming the way his mother's does when she chooses grace over argument. I slid the rope over the horse's nose, not cinching, just giving us a whisper of a chance to steer panic if it came, and tucked my shoulder into the deadfall to shift the angle. "On 3, I told Evan, and he sank the bolt-cutter jaws around the lock like he'd trained for this. The first bite slid, the second held and squealed, On the third, he put his whole boy's future behind it, and the shank snapped with a sound like a small justice. The chain fell a half-inch and the horse didn't bolt. He froze, shook once, then put his forehead against my chest like somebody too tired to float. I found the key that wasn't there, just habit, and then unwrapped each cruel loop one turn at a time. Talking about nothing. The creek in May. The way alfalfa smells when you flip a fresh bale. How winter feels like apology if you give it long enough. The last loop slid and he shuddered through me from nose to hock, like a wire carrying a charge. And then he tried to sit from sheer relief. Evan was there, hand out, voice syrup slow. "Good boy," he murmured. "Good boy." And I remembered he used to say it to lightning bugs cupped in his palms and new shoes that didn't blister. And the first calf he pulled at 9. As if the world could learn by being told gently. We should have had 3 minutes to breathe. We got one. Brush cracked behind us with the particular carelessness that belongs to men who think woods are furniture. And 2 shapes stepped into the clearing with rifles slung the way some folks swing a shovel. The taller one wore a grin he must have practiced until it stuck. "You got our livestock," he said. "We appreciate you doing the hard part." The other's eyes were jittery, pinging between the chain, the blood, Evan's hands, my bolt cutter, my hip where my pistol lived under denim. I moved sideways without moving, giving myself a line to my horse, giving Evan a line to the creek, giving the black horse a line to nobody. "This animal isn't yours," I said, and I kept my voice polite because sometimes men like that mistake politeness for weakness and walk into better choices. The grin got wider like a stain. "He's worth more than your truck when he's cooled down," he said. Or parted out. "You know how it works." I do, I thought, and I felt my world tunnel to the size of a fist. "You shot him," Evan said, voice shaking but not from fear. "You chained him." The jittery one shifted his rifle like a nervous tick. "Son," I said without taking my eyes from the grin, "step back to my right." The black horse breathed hot through my shirt and into the place under my ribs where panic used to set up camp. I let my hand show the pistol without showing aggression. Palms open. That preposterous pantomime we do when we want to convince idiots not to make themselves smaller. "County's got a new sheriff," I said. "He'll want to see your paperwork." The tall man laughed, a sound with no weather in it. "County's got a long drive," he said. "And we've got a short temper." The bullet that left his partner's rifle hit the deadfall and not me, because Evan, God bless every stubborn inch of him, slung the bolt cutter like a discus at exactly the moment a boy becomes a man, and the laws of nature bend to love. The clatter and curse bought 2 seconds, and I spent both. One to get Evan behind my horse, one to draw and put a warning shot into the dirt between us that lifted dust and logic. "Leave," I said. And whatever was in my voice must have belonged to the part of me that buried my father and chose to get up the next morning anyway, because the jittery one twitched, then took a step back, then another, and the smiling one's grin peeled off his face like bad paint. "This isn't over," he promised, as if the worst thing he could imagine was to be embarrassed, and they slid backward the way cowards do. Hurled words first, footprints second. We listened until their branches stopped talking, and then longer, because safety after gunfire is a superstition. When the woods returned our breath, we took stock. The horse's shoulder needed more than hope. The fetlock gash seeped steady, and deeper cuts along the chest where the chain had ridden said infection like a sentence. "We can't leave him," Evan said, and I almost laughed because no one in our bloodline has ever been capable of that, and the boy said it as if the sentence had always been true, and the world was just catching up. Moving him would be pain. Leaving him would be worse. I pulled the small kit from my saddlebag that lives between baling twine and bandage wraps, poured iodine-like prayer over each raw place while Evan held the big head steady by sheer talk, and flushed the bullet groove with saline until clean became a real word. The horse trembled under my hands, but he didn't leave. His lip drooped, his eye softened to something like surrender, and I thought about all the times life had put a chain around the softest part of me, and cinched, until I believed the lie that hurt was all I had coming. "We're going to walk him out," I said. Slow and ugly. We tied a soft line from my saddle horn to his halter, not enough to drag, just enough to ask, and when we asked, he answered. We took the creek crossing 1 inch at a time. the water lifting around his legs like it wanted a trophy. 3 times he wavered, and 3 times Evan's hand and voice brought him back to center. In the shallows where round stones roll and make it hard to commit to a foot, he stopped dead and closed his eyes. "You're okay," Evan whispered, forehead against muzzle. And for a second I saw the child he'd been, and the man he was going to be overlapped like 2 pieces of sky, and I had to swallow hard against the burn of something that wasn't the cold. We made the bank. We made the lower trail. We made the ridge in a series of small faiths that added up to 1 mile. And when the barn light finally cut a yellow door into the dark, it felt like an award you don't apply for. The vet picked up on the first ring, Patricia, who has hands like firm kindness and a voice horses recognize through pain. "Stabilize and don't let him lie down," she ordered, already driving. We built a stall in seconds we didn't have. Clean straw, warm water. The kind of quiet you carry in on purpose. I stitched what I could with the small needle I shouldn't have been using, and then stepped back when Patricia shouldered in with the good kit and the better eyes. "You did right," she said, as if right had been obvious, and sedated him to the gray place where courage can rest. She drew the bullet with a calm that made time a polite guest, flushed, wrapped, taught Evan how to count breaths and capillary refill with 2 fingers and a clock face. "The next 72 hours are a line," she said. "We'll walk it." I set up a cot in the aisle and Evan set up a stubbornness beside it, and we took the night in shifts that weren't really shifts because neither of us left. Around 3, the horse started to sink, a slow listing of the ship, heart rate climbing like a man on a bad ladder. Pain is a thief, and he was being robbed in plain sight. I put my hand at the base of his neck and told him a story I hadn't told anyone. Not the war story, but the one from afterward. About the day I sat in my truck with the engine off and the world too loud, and remembered my own father putting a hand on my shoulder after the tornado took the roof and saying, "We rebuild from the center out," and how I had found my center eventually in the rhythm of hooves and the smell of hay. Evan sang a song he learned when he was 5 about rain and rescue and ridiculous rhymes, and the big horse's breathing slipped from panic to the kind of tired that still believes. Dawn came and pretended the world was easier. It wasn't, but the light made us braver. The sheriff came by late morning with questions packaged as coffee. We gave him the versions that mattered. 2 men, 1 grin, 1 flinch, a chain and a padlock. A wounded animal the law would want a statement for, if not a sermon. He took casts of the boot prints out by the clearing, photographed the broken lock like a tourist, and told me in that honest way of his that arrests would be a process. "They'll hear this town learn to look up," he said, which is country speak for community isn't a rumor anymore. By afternoon, word had already traveled by methods older than cell towers, neighbors, drifted through with bales and bandage, rolls and casseroles like apologies, and a girl from downriver pressed a carrot into my son's hand with a seriousness that made me want to buy her a horse right then. Through it all, the black gelding stood like a storm-bent tree, hurt but not broken, swaying but rooted. When the worst of the fever had burned off and he started taking sips of water without me begging, Evan looked at me with that cautious, shining question kids use when they want something big and are afraid. Wanting it is impolite. "Can we keep him?" he asked, then corrected himself. "Can we keep on with him?" It was the right verb, and I felt it land like a good nail. "If he'll keep on with us," I said, and the horse flicked an ear like he'd been waiting to be offered a choice his whole life. We didn't name him that day. You don't hang a name on a soul until it knows it's allowed to stay. But in the evenings, when the light went gold through the barn slats and the sound of breath and swallows made a kind of chapel, I started to think of him as Chance because it was what we'd given and what he'd taken. The 3rd night he lay down proper, and I didn't panic because he got up on his own. The 5th day, Patricia cleared him for a hand walk to the south paddock, and Evan walked him like he was escorting a king who had forgotten his crown. The rope never went tight. The trust did. Some scars do what scars do, harden into maps you carry forward. But the heat went out of the worst places, and the skin along his chest stopped speaking in complaint and started remembering it could be skin. A week later, when the sheriff called to say 2 men had been pulled over 3 counties east, with a truck bed full of chains and not much imagination, I took Evan to the barn with a pair of cheap brass tags and a question. Looks like this town knows how to finish a thing, I told the horse, and he put his nose in Evan's palm with a gentleness that undid me. We clipped a tag to the stall door and another to the halter. Chance, it said. And you could have told me the act didn't matter, but I would have asked you to watch the boy's face and try again. If you're still here, and if you are, tell me where you're watching from, because I want to know what rivers and ridge lines this found its way across. Then know this isn't a story about us being better than those men. It's a story about not becoming them. We fixed a life because it was there to fix, and the world got a little bigger for it. Chance will carry scars you can see and some you can't. Same as me, same as my boy, same as most of the people I love. Sometimes in the gray space before the sun commits, I catch Evan sprawled in the straw, back against the gelding's shoulder, reading in a whisper while a big black ear swivels like a metronome, and I feel the urge to thank everything that had to go wrong to make this right. On the first day, we let him try the pasture. Chance stepped into the light with that careful reach horses use when remembering how to be free, took 3 tentative strides, then, just once, lifted into a clumsy, beautiful canter that made my throat hurt. He checked himself when his leg said not yet, then turned and came to the boy who waited at the gate like a lighthouse. Some rescues end with sirens. Ours ended with a halter, a soft word, and a decision to keep choosing each other. If this found you on a day you're chained to something you didn't deserve, take whatever breath you can. Ask for help like it's a skill and not a failure. And keep your eyes on the people who lean their shoulders into deadfalls instead of walking by. And if you want more stories like this, hard nights bent toward hope, tap like, share it with someone who needs a reason to stay, and subscribe so you don't miss the next time a boy, a man, and a horse decide to make a little mercy loud enough to scare the dark.